Hey everyone, what's up? This is Uri for Gorilla Poker, and in this video I'm going to be reviewing a hand played at 200, 400 between Apestyles and Burundus 254 on ACR Poker. Burundus is Moonistar, well-known long-time high-stakes reg, and Apestyle I think is a well-known long-time MTT pro. And yeah, going to be an interesting hand, so let's get to it. So pre-flop starts with a button-raising Apestyle 3 bets, and Burundus called 4 bets. Cold 4-bet range tends to be a very linear range because you don't really have calls. You're not calling the 3-bet much in theory. It's not a spot where you go good hands and bad hands. It's more just all your good hands. So this is, including King Queen suited and Ace Jack suited and maybe Queen Jack suited and probably 10s and 9s and just a very, very linear range. Not exactly sure on the thresholds, but yeah, you can kind of imagine it in your head. And the way Apestyles is going to play is they're a bit deep, so maybe he can 5-bet fold or he can 5-bet jam. They're both okay. And that would be with a more polarized range of good hands and bluffs once he does that, because he doesn't want to take pure good hands when he does that. And you're going to have lots of flatting, including with fairly strong hands. So in this instance, he does flat. We get a 3-4-6 rainbow board, and at this point it's very important to pause and think about how this board interacts with the ranges. And the better you are at this, the more successful of a poker player you're going to be, because in 6 max, ranges shift all the time. So the action we have is Apestyles 3-bet from the small blind, which already filters his range, to pretty much missing this board other than pocket pairs and the occasional very low frequency suited connector. And even in terms of pocket pairs, he's not supposed to really have 3s and 4s, just 5s and 6s, and even those not full frequency. So he misses this board a lot. And Burundus also misses this board other than his overpairs. So even though the board looks like 3-4-6, where you might think people have 5-7 suited, 4-5 suited, and pocket 4s, these hands aren't really there in this instance, and that's very important. It's a very bricky board. It's similar to like a 3-3-6 board. People are just not going to hit very much. So this becomes kind of an air and overpairs type of spot versus air and overpairs, where Burundus has the higher overpairs. So he can't bet everything. He has to kind of balance stuff out, because otherwise he'd be betting too much. I think maybe cold 4-bets he can start out betting everything on the flop and he has to balance on the turn. But yeah, just in terms of what the board looks like, and here we get Burundus going for 1/3 pot. Maybe he's betting everything or betting fairly wide. And Apestyles calling, and in these SPRs you get this effect, which is a bit unintuitive, of Apestyles sometimes just raising and going for stacks with low pocket pairs, despite not really being a favorite when money goes in, just to deny equity, because the pot is so big. So just getting, ace king, ace queen, king queen to fold is worth a decent chunk when you have something like 7s or 10s, because those hands have 25% pot share. But yeah, he calls. Here he's going to have, 2 overs with a flush draw sometimes, all his pocket pairs at some frequency in there, stuff like ace-5 suited, ace-4 suited probably hits and is in the range. Okay, so turn Ace of Hearts. Ace of Hearts shifts things dramatically. It's a very big card, because now Burundus' overpair advantage plays out differently, because Kings, Queens that he has more of are not really worth as much. He does have Ace King a lot, which is worth more. But yeah, it's kind of an equity shifting card and a plan shifting card. So whereas if you had a 3 on the turn, Burundus would keep betting polar. On the ace, he suddenly has created out of thin air a shift in his range where the middle part is now Kings, Queens, Jacks, 10s, 9s, and the top card is now Ace-X top part, whereas before it was the opposite. The top part was the overpairs and the middle part was Ace-X. And here Burundus decides to go with a 10% pot bet. Interesting to think what this means from a strategic standpoint, and the answer would be that he's betting the size he thinks he wants to go with Kings through 9s, which is a lot of his range, and protecting it. It's uncommon to see. I'm not sure this is exactly the best sizing, but the logic feels clear, where With something like queens, you want to go bet turn check river, but you don't necessarily want to separate queens from the rest of your range. So maybe you bet everything. Stuff doesn't need, much protection. Yeah, so just kind of bet everything small and then polarize on the river. Could be a potential plan. Apestyle goes for the check raise, implying he's beating the core of Muniz' range. So this would, I think you can just do this with a good ace. Not every ace queen plus, but at least mixed. We have a call, 4 on the river for a brick, shove and a call, and again my guess would be the threshold for this is somewhere, for sure ace king, maybe ace queen, ace jack as well, at some frequency. And Burundus is probably going to have to mix calling down with hands like pocket queens, pocket kings, because those are the core of the turn block bet range. Now, Apestyle has 6s, which makes perfect sense for pre-flop. He can slow play flop sometimes. And then versus a turn block bet, he decides to go for it, which I think makes sense. You always slow play some, fast play some in these spots. So well played hand by him. And Muniz has pocket aces for the boat over boat cooler, which also seems well played, but the interesting thing is the sizing, and I want to quickly do a short solver dive with you guys. Okay guys, so what we have here is a sim for this spot with roughly the stack sizes. We have the board, the ranges are not going to be accurate, but just to show you guys the in position called 4-bet range, like we said, is going to be linear. So no 5-6 suited or queen 9 suited in there, whereas the out of position range is going to be missing a lot of the top part because that part would have 5-bet. And then it's like a small blind versus button minus some hands range. The flop, we have a check, 100% c-bet. Actually, like we said, it's a bricky board and this range is linear, so actually does have enough overpairs and advantage to carry stuff. Out of position, like we said, doesn't hit 3, 4, 6 too much, hence the 100% c-bet, and something like 6s is going to mix calling and fast play. And we were talking about what else do you call other than the pairs. We said we'd have these weird ranges, raises, and yeah, you can just float overs like the good overs with a backdoor flush draw, and even just ace queen. So now the turn, so we have actually a full rainbow turn, which is interesting. The preferred sizing is similar to Muniz's sizing. It's actually not 10%, but it's 25%. And you can do this kind of merge, and actually aces doesn't get in there too much. But yeah, 10s, jacks, queens, 9s can keep betting. And like we said, the idea is that with something like 10s, jacks, queens, you bet, villain calls, you get some river, like a 9, whatever, and then you get to check back 10s, jacks, queens, and you got some protection, and you got to avoid facing a bet with a polarized range. And if you bet, your opponent can raise, this size, not with every ace, but with ace, queen, certainly, and then shove river. And here looks like I have only a largish raise size, but it's not super important. But yeah, I guess for completeness' sake, let's actually have the correct raise size. Okay, so versus a small bet, yeah, Pio would go with a large raise actually, even if you put in smaller ones, and some bricky river, whatever, doesn't really matter. But in this instance, we had a 4, and then you get to keep going with your ace queen, your ace 4, your pocket 6s, and let's see if I was correct about in positions threshold. And yeah, he kind of needs to call every ace and have a low mix of these pocket pairs. This is with this size. Now, Muniz chose a smaller size, and his mistake probably is, it's a very natural one, is in estimating the strength of the ranges, where clearly the reason for this size is centered around 9s, 10s, jacks, queens betting, but how much money do they like betting? And if you bet smaller, your opponent calls and you get a 4 river, certainly they're going to check back, but queens can kind of almost bet again. Whereas, I guess you can kind of just see this on the turn. If you look at the EV of jacks, there's this tiny effect where the small bet is just 10% is just a bit too small. So very nuanced, it's just a bit too small here. And if there were a flush draw, I'm sure it would be even more pronounced. But yeah, I think the key concept is what we call protecting the core of your range. So if we think the core of the range is knights through queens and our top pairs don't need protection, makes a ton of sense to size for these nines through queens or eights through queens in terms of our sizing, carry them to showdown, and then take it from there. So kind of nice advanced concept that Muniz showcases here. In the game tree that Muniz went to, which is not one the solver would have gone to, you get more ace queens raising as well as ace jacks and ace tens mixing, and then of course on the four river these top pairs going block bet or shove, and if they shove in position again, needs to sometimes call with hands even as wide as queens, given that's the core of the range. But the nuances of how often depend on SPR, and even the fact that these guys were 125 deep rather than 100 deep makes it so that you get to kind of just defend with almost completely top pairs. But yeah, what you guys are seeing is an empty screen. So to read this out for people less proficient with the solver, I guess maybe I'll show you guys as a very last thing. How would you actually look at this in a solver? Let's say you wanted to know what happens with a 10% bet. So you would remove the 25 as an option and say, okay, I want the protection bet to be actually 10. So even though it's the suboptimal one, then Pio doesn't use it at all. Like you lose too much value. So you might say, okay, I want only a 10% bet on the turn. I'm not having other sizes. And then in this case, you would go, okay, only 10%. So we bet all the pairs and all kind of everything. And then when our opponent raises, we're going to have to mix call all these pocket pairs on a turn. And facing a shove, call mostly queens because it blocks ace queen, but yeah, kind of mix on the river. And your opponent would raise with still mostly ace queen. Your range is just too strong. All the ace kings in there. But yeah, hopefully that makes sense, guys, and wasn't too long-winded. That's it for this one. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know if these small solver add-ons in the end are useful for you guys, where you get to see a bit the shape of the strategy, because usually I'm just reading it from experience, but it's nice to see the backup sometimes, at least for me. And yeah, see you guys next time.